Hello and welcome to OT the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is Andy Green.
And my name is Johnny Goodsnake, aka Felix Schultz.
Johnny Goodsteak. Felix, today we have Alan Bedwell, the man behind Foundwell. If you're on Instagram, he is a fine antiques purveyor.
I'd also go so far as to say he's a fine gentleman and a lovely person.
He's a really, really cool guy to talk to. I had an absolute blast, and this is a very good chat.
One of those chats for me, like, sometimes when we chat to someone, we know them. We've maybe met them before, or several times before. I didn't really know Alan. We'd exchanged a few emails. I'm like, hey, you've got an interesting take on watches and stuff. We should get you on the podcast. And I'd talk to him again.
I talk to him regularly.
Yeah, he's
engaging guy.
I want to talk more about clocks. He can be our go-to clock expert.
Cool guy, knows his stuff and has been in the game for a long time. So we will get into that in a minute, Felix. But before we do that, you've been busy.
I have been busy in several capacities. Mm-hmm. One unique way of being busy, I had dinner recently with Bremont, which was a very, very 2021 experience because we did, we had a lovely dinner, saw some people. We didn't have to wear masks while we ate dinner. That was amazing. Saw the new watch, the new longitude with the in-house movement, but also got a virtual tour of the wing, thanks to an iPhone and the English brothers.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was nice. That was good to get back into the swing of things. But that's not all, Andy. This podcast is going to take quite a left turn.
Swerves.
I spotted a link that I had to click. It was a compact Android phone made by a Japanese luxury toaster company.
Oh.
Which was not what I was expecting when I hit my, news algorithm. So I don't know anything about the Bermuda phone, except that it's allegedly made by a Japanese luxury toaster company. But the wild thing for me is that they haven't white labeled it. So it's not like a, Huawei phone that has their logo on it. They have legitimately put all the parts together. And so if you're in the market for a slightly more compact, ergonomic, palm-sized iPhone 3 looking Android phone that has a tie into toasters, maybe there's an app that you can control your toaster. I just think that's wild.
How much is it?
I don't know.
No, not much. I can't imagine it's very expensive.
I don't know. Luxury toasters, though, they, can spend a lot of money on a toaster. So.
Oh, I know.
You got that Dolce & Gabbana Smeg toaster, Andy?
I have a Bermuda, which was imported from the United States and requires a separate power converter.
Do you actually have a luxury Japanese toaster?
I don't know if it's Japan. I don't know where Bermuda is.
Is it Bermuda?
From,
no, that's the phone.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
No. It's right there, and it says the Bermuda phone.
Oh wow. Yeah, I have a Bermuda toaster. It has a little 5 ml cup that you have to put water in every time you toast stuff. We had to buy a converter, the power converter box to plug it in because it requires different voltage to the Australian
You've got
power
the fancy rice cooker as well, don't you?
Yeah, I got some appliances. Oh look, it was not a cheap toaster.
Would you buy the phone based on the quality and performance of the toaster? Would you trust them to branch out into mobile telephony?
Yeah, look, if they make phones half as good as their toasters, then I think this phone's going to be pretty amazing.
Hey, should we keep on with over-engineered luxury items? I spotted something, and I want you to explain it to me because this feels like more your wheelhouse.
I see what you did there. The Hyundai Heritage Series Grandeur EV electric vehicle.
Sexy car, Andy. That's all I need to know about it.
Yeah, how nice is this? So it's a concept car, unfortunately, that sort of takes a 1980s model and makes it electric and puts the finest technology that Hyundai has to offer. And the internet has gone crazy. The internet has gone absolutely crazy. I mean, that 1980s styling, super boxy.
The pixel headlights and taillights. Yeah. Do you know what it looks like to me?
What's that?
If you imagine they made a DC comic or a Marvel comic movie and they had a Lex Luthor or some sort of billionaire bad guy, this is the car they would drive. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. It's straight out of a Batman film or something, but it is just so incredibly cool looking. Like they could make this and sell this for $500,000 and people would buy it. Interesting
yeah.
time display as well. It's got the Nixie tube
Well, this
readout.
I don't know if that one does, but there was I was doing
Oh, the
some
pony does.
research.
Sorry.
The Heritage Series Pony, which is the
Yep.
more it's like your little hatchback as opposed to
Mm,
the luxury limousine model, but it's
mm,
got the speedo and accelerometer are made out of Nixie tubes, which I thought was, if you'll pardon my French, fucking ridiculous.
yeah.
Yeah, I just. And I think I find this is this something that car companies do to like I know concept cars are like, hey, this is the future, but
No,
celebrating their past as well.
not really. They do. They'll do limited editions that are sort of inspired, like the
Like those
Bullet.
Jags we had a while back that
Yeah, the Jag. That's pretty close. I mean, those took actual
parts and like
vintage cars and chassis and
rebuilt them
and,
and
and
stuff.
resto modded them. This is a concept. I mean, this could be renders for all we know. I don't know if the actual car exists. But yeah, normally the concepts will look to the future and sprinkle the technology that you can kind of expect to see in 10, 15,
Yeah.
20 years. So
Well,
pretty cool.
I expect to see this in the next Blade Runner sequel.
Do you know where you won't see this?
Where,
Red Notice on Netflix.
I mean, there was a car in that. There was a impressive historical vehicle in there.
There were
Uh,
several. Yeah.
what did you think?
It was hilarious, and I think not for the reasons that it should have been, but also deliberately so.
Yep.
Like it was so naff.
So, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
We need like a rating system. We need
Mm,
out of six watches, out of six sports Rolexes, how many
mhm.
sports Rolexes would you give Red Notice?
3.5.
Okay.
It was. I. I just we're at a time in the world where two of the like highest paid actors in existence, or three, I should say, can come together and do a 2-hour film that's kind of meaningless for online streaming.
Yeah. I kind of loved it. I
I can see that.
yeah, there were a few things. One thing I did. Speaking of cars, just reminded me. I did like the moment with the electric Porsche.
That was quite good.
That was vaguely unexpected. For me, though, I think it's amazing because what really struck me about this is that you could trailer this movie in like easily 3 or 4 different ways. You could trailer it like a Bond film. You could trailer it like Ocean's 11. You could trailer it like, straight up just an action movie. You could trailer
Mm,
it like Indiana Jones.
yep.
Anyone that likes any of those films will go, this has got some great people in it. I'll give it a go. And they may or may not be disappointed with the sum of its parts.
How much time do you think? Like, okay, so how much time do you think that The Rock, Gal Gadot, and Ryan Reynolds put into this film?
I mean, they're all professionals and they would do it. But also, I mean, I don't think these were particularly demanding roles.
No, exactly. But like, how much? Like this, this to me, it feels like something they really pumped out, and good for them. Good
Like,
for them.
yeah, like they made it as an extra. Like they had 3 weeks in their schedules and
This was this was at most 4 weeks of filming.
a lot of VFX. It was kind of great. Like,
Yeah, it definitely was deliberate. Like you don't get the feeling at any point in the film that it's intended to be in any way serious.
yeah, I would have liked. I was sold by it as a concept of Indiana Jones. So when I hit go, I said to my partner, I said there had better be some, map travel montage happening in this film. And about halfway through,
Yeah,
I was not disappointed. I just loved the fact that they worked, Nazis in South America into there.
they worked a lot. Ed Sheeran makes an appearance. That was quite good.
Bloody Ed Sheeran. And there was some watch content as well.
There was Watches was pivotal.
Yeah,
But that
key
just
plot
came
point.
in the last quarter of the
I
film.
wonder if they've produced that. If we can get the Invicta Red Notice watch.
Was it Invicta?
I don't know. It had that sort of vibe. But then again, maybe given what that watch was representing, you don't want that. Speaking of less historically loaded watches, Andy,
Yeah.
what have you been hanging out with recently?
So I've had this watch for longer than I should have, but it's the William Wood Triumph from the William Wood Triumph collection, the Oxygen edition. So that's the blue dial, blue bezel, blue strap
Nice.
chronograph that
Nice.
they've done pretty recently. So first thoughts, if you'll have them, Felix.
Sure.
Fits well. It's 41 millimeter case, so pretty good for a chronometer, I got to
Yeah,
say.
that's pretty solid.
Pretty solid, smaller than some of the chronographs I own. So it's comfortable to wear. The strap is, we've talked about Linwood straps in the past. Really comfortable.
One of our OG sponsors, by the way. So
They were our first watch sponsor, I think.
Really?
So they took a chance on OT early on. So that
yeah.
should be enough reason for anyone listening to
well
to
done.
show them some love, give them a follow at least.
Yep.
So they did this this watch, and the box that it comes in, Felix, is insane. It is a big red, and it's got to be. I'm eyeballing it now, like 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. It's big. It'll rival the an Omega Speedmaster box.
Oh, really?
For real estate. Yeah, definitely. But it's got a big fire kind of symbol stitched into the top, and then like a plexiglass screen that says
Whoa.
it says break glass here, and then that's where the watch
cute.
sort of sits. It's very cute. I should take a photo.
Is there a tiny little hammer in there as well?
I think you just drop an elbow to get it out. And then there's all these sort of little storage systems, so straps and spring bars, and I think it holds 3 watches in total.
I love a box that adds value, like that does more than just live in the cupboard.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty cool. It's pretty cute. Like and it fits in with the whole firefighting theme of the brand, and I don't think this watch is any different in terms of like the upcycled strap and the crowns. I believe the crowns are inset from original British brass firefighting helmets.
Yeah, and the pushers based on this pic, I can see they look like they're brass as well, or
the pushers might be brass,
some sort of non-steel material.
I think it's brass plating. On the pushers, but
Yep.
the crown has the actual brass from a helmet like inset to it. Then it's got the date at 6, which is handy. Got a rotatable bezel, water resistant to 100 meters, which is plenty. The sapphire crystal's got like a subtle dome to it, which is nice. So you get some nice little reflections on the dial. What else? The Superluminova on the subdials, which is cool. So they're sort of backlit with Superlume.
I'm pretty into the subdials, like, and that sort of they're not full circles. They've like cut the bottom off to give it like a real gauge
vibes.
Vibe. I think it's a nice sort of retro vibe take, but not too OTT.
Yeah, it feels good. There's a good weight to it. I haven't weighed it, but it feels pretty solid on the wrist. Does come with a bunch of other straps.
How much are we talking about in terms of Skrilla?
Skrilla. So on their website is $4,565.48.
I assume that's some conversion to the minute figure. That 48
I think they
cents.
do some honest conversion in real time. Yeah. So that is.
They don't want to stiff you out of an extra 52 cents and round it up.
Yeah.
But also, they don't want to lose that 48 cents.
It is what it is. Thank you to William Wood for sending it out. I should definitely take some photos for the gram.
Yeah, cool. Well, I assume by the time this episode's out, there'll be some pics on maybe the OT or maybe Andy Green Live.
We'll get them up.
Hey, Andy. Moving on, but keeping it with watches. As you know, this episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Nomos.
Thank you, Nomos.
They sponsored last week, and they're going to be sponsoring next week as well. So we're going through some gifting themed stuff, some festive, some it's Christmas coming up.
It is weeks away.
Yeah, God, too soon. But weirdly though, Andy, we're not really going to be talking about watches this week.
No.
I think what I did before in sort of preparing for this, I went to the old Nomos website, headed to their online shop, made sure my cookies were setting everything to Australian dollars, and clicked the straps and accessories sections because Nomos has got some heat in this department. Like, I can't think of too many brands that like have as solid a, watch related, non-watch content available to buy.
And Felix, I mean, as a couple of individuals that have spent a fair bit of time with the brand, in Basel, previous years, these accessories are often gifts that we get given when we visit them. And they're all high quality. I'm looking at notebooks that I've been using and pencils that I've been using. Love what Nomos do. But Felix, a new strap is almost as good as a new watch, as you would know. Almost. And it's part of the fun. You can play around with it. You can take the steel bracelet off, get a fabric strap, maybe leather strap, put it on, can change the buckle out. You might think that a polished buckle looks better than a brushed or something. Or you might like a deployant clasp instead of something like a winged clasp. So it's sort of like that variety that kind of refreshes the watch. And Christmas for Australians symbolizes a change of seasons. The weather starts to heat up. So if you do have a Nomos that's on a bracelet, I would suggest checking out a different strap maybe.
Well, for me, I think for me, with the straps, the Nomoses I've got have typically come on leather. I don't want leather in summer. The club you've got comes on a very nice fabric strap. You can get that
Textile
sort of
strap, yeah.
that textile, get that vibe from them. I also found out, Andy. So last week we talked about that Club Neomatic 42 Sport. I'm
Yep.
sure I've said those words in the wrong order, but the one that comes with that new bracelet, you can buy that Club Sport bracelet separately. Which
$480.
$480, which comes on a nice, nice sort of folding clasp. You would have to maybe check the curvature at the end, but not a bad shout if you just want to get that sort of upgrade.
Yeah, it's a great shout, and it's very, very reasonably priced.
Can we buy it or not?
It says this normal strap is exclusive to the Club Sport Neomatic 42 Date Black and Club Sport Neomatic Date Blue. So it fits those.
Okay, so
you can't hack it on, but there's plenty of other straps. I think a textile strap for summer. There's a heap of colours.
And there's straight end bracelets as well.
There's braided textile and woven, so different textures as well. So and what I really like about the strap on my Nomos is that it is super thin.
Yes.
Light and breezy, so it just feels comfortable. It feels nice.
I've had both the braided and the woven, and I think the ones that they're shipping now are really, really good, like the ones that you've got.
Yeah, it's solid. Yeah. And look, they sell a bunch of other really cool stuff as well, Felix.
Yeah, 100%. That is gold in the accessory section. And I think this is a really good strategy. So I understand that you're not necessarily going to buy a watch every year because that's a lot of money. Or maybe there's someone in your life. Maybe you're listening to this bizarrely, and you're not really into watches, but your partner is.
Just like us. You like us for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that can happen. So maybe there's maybe you've got a friend or someone in your life that has a Nomos, and you want to be Team Nomos, but you don't necessarily want to buy them another Nomos. This is where the accessories come in. Cannot go wrong with a loop. Nomos sell quite a nice wooden one. I think it's a 3.5 magnification, which honestly it's what you want. You don't need
perfect.
You don't need 5 or 10. That gets too scary and up close. That's for the watch lover that has everything. Buy them some more.
Great stocking fillers. I mean, there's
stocking fillers,
strap tools. There's cleaning cloths.
You could be like
travel cases.
You could be super stingy and just buy them some new spring bars.
Just the watch box and travel case. Having had both of these, cool gifts to have, like a little presentation box. It doesn't take up a lot of space, so it's not obnoxious. A couple of different case options as well. What else? They've got their sundial stainless steel.
The sundial's cool. I mean, that's
very cool.
That's like, it tells the time, but through the power of the sun, you can use it as a pendant. And that's a great, I've often thought about buying that just as a jewelry object. 2 other recommendations from me, Andy. I've got one of their sort of grey hardback fabric bound notebooks.
Yes. So
and as someone that has a lot of notebooks, this is one of the ones I use a lot. It's like I want to say A5, small A5. A6 size, really nice. $20. That's, I'd be super stoked if someone got something like that for me, or a little bit more. Maybe pair it with a fountain pen. They've got steel versions. They've got brass versions. They're made by Kawaco, which is a German fountain pen maker. They're cool. They're really,
very cool.
really
box looks cool as well.
Yeah. And finally, I think is another sort of fun stocking filler, and I'm not sure what you'd really do with these here in Australia, but you can buy some Nomos Deutsche Post stamps.
Could do collectible items for the Nomos super fans in your life. Well, Felix, given that there's the Nomos Advent calendar, which is also something very cool in German, Nomos basically do these 24 giveaways every day in the lead up to Christmas.
Yeah,
it's sort of fun, and you never know, you might win something. Some Christmas cheer even.
Yeah, it's a really cool German tradition. I think the old Advent calendar, and in the past they've you might sort of get those sort of things that we've just talked about. I think they've given away watches in the past.
Yes, they have. Yeah.
So, have you entered it before?
Yes, I did last year.
Have you ever won anything?
No, I haven't.
No.
It's one prize a day, I think. So
Yes. Well, 1 in 24 chance for, you can enter them all though, which
got
is,
to be in it to win it, guys.
yeah. And the other thing I think that's worth mentioning about this, Andy, is that buying from Nomos online, it's a great experience. Like
Mm.
shipping's pain free. It's convenient. It's presented really nicely, so you don't necessarily have to rewrap if you're running short
Nah,
on time.
don't have to wrap it at all. Just straight
Yeah,
under the tree.
straight into the stocking. But if you wanted to check some of this stuff out IRL, not entirely sure about the Deutsche Post stamps. They might not carry those at local Australian retailers, but the Hourglass, Monards, and Master Watchmakers are the local Nomos reps.
Well, Felix, we're going to link everything up, but make sure you head to nomos-glashute.com to check out everything that we've talked about, all the accessories and strap options. That's nomos-glashute.com.
Nice.
Felix, we need to get back to the show. We need to get Mr. Alan Bedwell from
Yes.
Foundwell
We've
on
found
the
him.
phone.
We've found him, and he is very well.
And he's not in bed. And he's well. He's well. All right, let's do that.
Today's guest, Andy, is Alan Bedwell, who has, since 2009, been bringing together an incredible collections of vintage pieces, but not just watches, items that have been curated specifically for the modern gentleman and, sort of showcase the craftsmanship and design of times gone by. Of course, the company is Foundwell, which is based in London and New York and works with a select group of luxury outlets to bring some truly old world glamour into modern life. Welcome to OT, Alan. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. And maybe before we sort of get into this, where you've come from and where you're going and all that sort of stuff, given that your business is called Foundwell, what's the coolest thing you've found recently?
Ooh, gosh. Well, I mean, I'm very lucky, really, because I'm able to find quite unusual things. A couple of things that spring to mind are, in fact, the piece that I just, not that I'm plugging my Instagram, but I posted yesterday, which is quite unusual. I love vintage Hermes, as anybody who's ever handled any of it will know. It's very beautiful stuff, and from the older stuff, quite rare. And I like the cufflinks and the men's jewelry, aside from the kind of traditional what you see, leather goods, etc. But I had a money clip, which very much in the Hermes world was obviously a stirrup in its shape, but then set in the center of the stirrup was a US silver $half. And on the reverse of it was the portrait of JFK. And the coin was from 1964, which was the year it was minted. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people know he was assassinated in 63. So it was made to commemorate him. And very unusual. I've seen Hermes stuff before with coins, but obviously usually French. So I could conclude, I guess, that it was made as a kind of, in honor of him, and no doubt it would have been made in a very, very, very limited run of pieces. So when I saw it, I was offered it by a dealer in France, and when I saw it, I couldn't believe it, honestly, because I've never even seen anything with a US coin from Hermes. So I snapped that up. So that was quite an exciting piece to get, honestly, a very recent one. Let's put it that way.
Oh, very cool. How do you authenticate something like that? Because you just mentioned that you've never seen it before, and I don't imagine there's history books on it. So how do you kind of confirm the story is legit?
Well, it's very hard, honestly. You kind of have to do it by feel, really, and looking at it. It fits perfectly into the frame of the stirrup. If things have been put together, they tend to look like they've been put together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair.
There's a certain feel. It just feels right. And there was wear to the coin that kind of matched the wear to the frame. So it was a piece that was well used as well, well loved. And all the other signs were there. It has the French assay hallmarks on it. It has the handwritten period correct signature on it. So it all kind of it made sense. But to your point, there is a little bit of I guess assumption that it is correct. But
Uh-huh.
I've handled a lot of stuff over the years, and so you kind of again, it's as I say, it's like it's a feel thing, really. It's a look and a feel thing. It's the same with watches. People would
Professional
say the same thing.
intuition.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah,
connoisseurship. That's what that is.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love watching those. There's a BBC do a brilliant show about people who uncover paintings and they bring them in, and then they get
Uh-huh.
authenticated and going through the story and trying to find out whether it's real or not. It's quite often it's put in front of an expert of that artist and they look at it and they're just okay, yes, this is correct, and it's purely down to their trained eye having looked and studied the artist for 10, 20, how long, 30 years. But I always find that
Mm-hmm.
fascinating because it is literally their word against perhaps the person who bought it 20 years ago, for example. So it's kind of one of those situations, really.
Sure. Well, you've been Foundwell, I should say, has been around since 2009. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you kind of got into
Yeah,
antique stealing?
I mean, as you say, Falmouth and since 2009. I'm the son of an antique dealer, so if
Ah.
anybody fits that mold, it will resonate very well with them that you're basically brought up in the business because obviously my father worked full time, and so and then my mother, it was her job. So summer holidays, any other school holidays, I was dragged around with my mum all over the country, really, doing antique shows and helping carry boxes and when instead of sitting there being bored, I would go around looking with my mum and essentially buying. And then when I got to an age where I was kind of capable, I was given £50 and I was given a small remit that I was allowed to buy in, which was enamel cufflinks, which I always enjoyed, kind of Art Deco colourful
Mm-hmm.
things, and then silver charms. I loved silver charms at the time, and then anything else that kind of caught my eye, really, that fitted my budget. So that really is where it all began. So 2009 is when Foundwell started, but I started at a very young age, really. My sister's a jeweler in London, and my other sister actually works for my mum's business now. So we kind of it's a family, run thing, really. So, my mum had me setting markers back into Art Deco buttons at the age of about 6 or 7 with glue and a pin because I had, tiny dexterous hands. So you kind of very much get put to work when you're a child of an antique dealer. So yeah.
And so what about Foundwell? What's the story there, or what's its particular focus?
Well, I mean, the name itself, obviously, my last name is Bedwell, so it was a play on that. And then, finding things well. And I kind of like the name. It has a kind of it almost has a bit of an old fashioned ring to it, really. So I felt it covered the remit of what I was doing as well, really. Because I'm not particularly, focused either on a period or on a type of product. We have watch dealers, exactly. For example, art dealers, all that kind of very specific way of dealing. But I've always enjoyed kind of everything, really. So it kind of came to pass that I was dating a girl at the time who worked at Bergdorf's, and which is a big department store in New
Mm-hmm.
York. And I was actually working for Ralph Lauren at the time here in New York, and it was a cocktail evening, and the boss of Bergdorf's was there, and Alison introduced me to her. Her name is Margaret Spagnola, and she said to me, "Oh, I hear you used to buy and sell antiques in London with Ralph Lauren because that was one of the jobs I did for Ralph in the UK." And Margaret
Cool.
mentioned that they were looking for somebody to supply the men's store with a selection of antiques. Would I be interested in doing it? And honestly, I hadn't really thought much about it, but it sounded like a great opportunity. So I said sure. So I got the introduction to the DMM of the men's store, a guy called Brooks Thomas at the time, and so exchanged emails, and then I was told to put a little kind of sample collection together, which I did, kind of scrabbled together to do it, and then presented it. Literally had to. I hope no one from else listening had to run away to an appointment during my lunch break at Ralph Lauren to present this little collection to Brooks and the then buyer for the men's store. And he was like, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, wonderful, amazing. We need like 6 times the amount." And I was like, "Okay, of course, no problem whatsoever. Obviously, that's what you say." But inside, I was kind of dying because I basically spent every dollar I had, and it had taken me, I guess, the best part of 3 months to do it. But with an opportunity like that, you have to take it. So there I was, and I think I pushed some time to give me a little bit more opportunity to do it, and then put it together, and it launched in 09 with Bergdorf's. So that was really kind of how Foundwell, if you like, came to pass.
What about the work with Ralph Lauren? Because obviously that's quite interesting. How did that happen? How did you start working for Ralph
So
Lauren?
my mother and my sister used to work with them in London. So obviously, I don't know if you guys have been to New York or the London
Yes,
foreign stores,
both.
but so it's Ralph is the master. He creates the illusion that you're walking into a stately home. Essentially, you've got beautiful oil paintings, you've got Persian rugs, you've got mahogany everywhere, and part of the magic as well is having props which are not for sale, and then he would also have vitrines full of antiques that were for sale. So there was a lady in London at the time who was doing that job, and she was friendly with my sister, and she had mentioned that she was pregnant and she wasn't going to come back, but she didn't want to leave them in the lurch. So she said to my sister, "If you know anybody who's interested in taking over my job, let me know." And I just kind of graduated from college at the time, and I did a finance degree, so I was kind of toying with actually going into banking. But then this was around the time of September the 11th, the tax, unfortunately, and the whole financial market went into an absolute meltdown, and there was about 15,000 people laid off in London in the finance sector in the space of about 6 weeks. All graduate recruitment was cancelled. So there I was, basically working for my mum, just to make some money and interviewing at any places I could. And then this kind of opportunity was presented to me. And so I thought, what, why not really? I'd never really thought about doing a job like that, but how often do those kind of jobs come up? And they're pretty rare jobs in themselves. So I thought, okay, I'll throw my hat into the ring. And so I said, sure. And then I interviewed, and it went quite well, I thought. And then I didn't hear back for about, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks, maybe. And then I got an email out of the blue saying, "Oh, we haven't forgotten about you. We're just evaluating the role at the moment. Things are kind of changing. We'll keep you in the loop." And I thought, okay, they're not interested really, because I was young at the time. And then about another probably 3 or 4 weeks went by, and I got another email saying, "Oh, we'd like you to come in again. The role's changed. Now it's including home collection, actually. So you'd be buying the antiques for the European stores, and you'd be an assistant buyer for the home collection for Ralph Lauren, focusing on tabletop, gift, and accessories. And of course, let's not forget dog. I was in charge of buying the dog products for Ralph Lauren stores.
That's incredible.
Yeah, quite a highlight of my career. Hopefully, it'll be on my tombstone when I pass away.
Well, I'm sure Hermes have made some dog products along the way as well.
Oh, for sure, absolutely, yes. But I got to buy, dog shearling sweaters and things.
That's great. So one thing I find fascinating, about what you're saying is the sense of scale. Like, as a consumer, I see a post on Instagram. I'm like, oh, that's a cool money pin. But how does it work sourcing, sort of quality antiques at a business scale? Like, how are you buying it? What's the sort of the nitty gritty behind the scenes of a volume business like that?
It's very hard, honestly, and during the pandemic too, it's been, I would say, nigh on impossible, because part of it is getting out on the road and going to shows and going to flea markets and going to antique fairs and whatnot, and traveling, not just domestically but internationally. And obviously without that kind of supply, it's been very, very challenging. So everything's kind of online, and or you're working with your connections. As I say, I've been doing this for a very long time, plus I'm the son of a dealer. So I'm very fortunate to have very good connections of people who know what I'm looking for. So I get offered, like other people, watch dealers, etc., who've been around, they get people offering them stuff all the time. So I have that too. Obviously, these days, a lot of stuff has moved online, which is a blessing and a curse. So I'm looking, obviously, daily online for pieces, anywhere from auction houses, eBay, all the millions of different places now, Ruby Lane, One Kings Lane, all that kind of stuff.
What's surging lately online, Alan? Like, I mean, as you kind of pointed out, the internet, I imagine, has dramatically changed your business.
Yeah.
As has the the exposure and popularity of these sort of more niche products. Like if I saw an Hermes money clip, I'd probably look at it a second time. But what's gone crazy and surprised you on the internet?
I mean, watches obviously is the easiest answer. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, because you know that. But
that's a very interesting perspective, though. Like, I think in watch world, we can sort of assume that everything's the same, but if it is unique, that's kind of a note.
Yeah, well, it's everything has become very popular, but the watches has completely outpaced everything else. There's no question in my mind. I don't see the price inflation, for example, that I see almost weekly at the moment happening in Art Deco silver that you see in watches. Let's say, And for example, I used to sell when I started the Bergdorf concession. I used to sell lots of cufflinks, lots, and I probably sell under 20 pairs a year now.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
So, that is one thing that has completely died. And so that's one example where things have, very much shifted the other way. However, and I've got lots of friends, in the fashion world, and, it just takes someone like Justin Bieber, for example, to walk out in a beautiful pair of like Art Deco cufflinks or something, and then all of a sudden everything comes back again. Everybody wants cufflinks and da 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 da. So, it is also cyclical, and it's fashion driven, and it's perhaps influencer, if you want to say, driven too. But that's an area that kind of went the other way. But I mean, I would say that branded things have obviously really taken off as well. So vintage Cartier, as we can all relate to in the watch world now, is incredibly hot right now. But vintage Cartier silver, vintage Cartier clocks and things, they've always had a strong following, and those prices continue to increase. But I think honestly, really, watches is definitely leading the way. I would say I did a big sale for Sotheby's last year, which was just focused on barware, which was a lot of fun because it's kind of one of my favorite personal areas to buy and sell. And it was based on Prohibition. Last year was the 100th anniversary of Prohibition. So that particular area too is very popular. So very good pieces of barware, also very, very, very hot right now as well.
Interesting. And you mentioned there that you're sort of particularly interested in barware. That's another sort of, with anyone that deals in vintage or is, sort of buying something personally, how do you balance buying things that you like or, or are personally interested versus buying things that are commercial? Is there a sweet spot in the middle, or do you lean one way more than another?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I have to be careful what I say, but I'm very lucky for my website, which is very small, and I don't really do a huge amount of business through it. It's more kind of almost advertising, and I don't particularly have a lot of time to kind of maintain it properly. But with the things I put on there, that tends to be kind of a more personal reflection of things that I like, if that makes sense. And then when I'm working with stores, I'll curate things that I think I still like. Obviously, I don't think I've ever bought anything I don't actually like. but I'm able to be a little bit more picky for myself, perhaps, because I can also pay maybe a higher premium because I don't have to make a big margin when I'm selling personally. Whereas, when I buy for wholesale, I have to make a small margin, and then they have to make a kind of more of a retail margin. So I have to be very price conscious as well with what I'm buying for wholesale. And then, I look at things and I think, okay, for example, with this, let's talk about cocktail shaker. I might find a very nice, handsome 1930s silver plate French cocktail shaker. Is it unique? No. Is it the most spectacular thing you've ever seen? No. But, if you can sell it for $7.95 in a retail store, it's perfect condition, looks beautiful, and it'll look great in someone's home bar. That's great. That does the job, if you like. So it's there. I wouldn't say there's compromise involved, but there's a lot of metrics behind the selection process when it comes to building out a collection, plus volume. I mean, when you have to, if you're working with a big department store and they've got a 20-foot case to fill, you can't be looking for the needle in the haystack every time.
So, Alan, related to your sort of last answer, is there an antique that whenever you get offered it or it pops up that you just snap right up? There's a sure thing that you're going to buy every time you see one.
Yes, I mean there are honestly quite a few. I love again. I mean, there are many things that fall into this category because I buy. When you buy silver, again, if we relate it to the kind of Rolex world, I like the date just. So whenever I get offered a very nice date just, I always buy them because I think for somebody who's looking for a very durable, not necessarily first watch because they're not really that cheap anymore, but if you want a very durable, kind of versatile dress it down watch, the date just does that. So I like date just. And then in the kind of silver antiques world, there are a few cocktail shakers that are absolutely iconic. One of which is the Napier Penguin, which is, as it sounds, a giant penguin, which is amazing. There are a number of models that Asprey made in the 20s and 30s that are stunning, beautiful, amazing quality, beautiful to look at. They're kind of ornaments in their own way, really. And if you have a home bar, it's kind of spectacular. So those types of things, very much so. What else is there? I mean, Dunhill. I love Dunhill. So I buy. I don't know if you're familiar with the aquarium range of lighters that they made, but they had one guy who basically hand carved these scenes into kind of lucite blocks and then hand painted and foiled them from the back, so they kind of look 3-dimensional and they tended to be fish, so they got nicknamed the aquariums. But he didn't just do fish. But I love those. I always buy. They came in 2 sizes. Well, there were 3 sizes, but the 2 you kind of normally see. They're all different, which is amazing. So they're not exactly the same every time, obviously. But I love those. So I always buy those when I find them at a good price. But I mean, the prices are crazy at the moment. So it's quite hard to do.
Yeah, wow, 5 figures.
Oh, I mean, easily. I mean, some I've seen some people asking 10, 12, 14,000 for some.
Yikes. So on the other side of that coin, are there any sort of categories or objects or brands that people are underappreciated or people are sleeping on at the moment?
Well, I mean, silver's very interesting because if you're a silver dealer or you're a silver collector, you're very familiar with certain names. So therefore, you kind of take it for granted that, oh yeah, I know his work, I like his work. But from like a broader perspective of the general public, if you like, yeah, there are lots of very beautiful silversmiths. I'm trying to think of his name now, which is terrible because I've had lots of his stuff. But there's an English silversmith who was making stuff in the 60s and 70s, but exceptional quality and very cool design. Some of it's a little bit period specific, like it very much feels 60s, 70s, but some of it's a little bit cleaner. I can't give you his name, but I'll send it to you. We can put it on the link. But his work is becoming a lot more popular, but still, I think, very underappreciated. Who else do I like? I mean, then there is kind of Samson Morden is a more classic Victorian silversmith, and a couple of my friends find it very amusing, but I quite like miniature stuff. I just think it takes a lot of skill to be able to reproduce something and make it very small, but make it, scale correct and beautifully executed. And so I quite often buy and sell and collect miniature stuff. And Samson Morden was kind of the genius of that. He made, it was he had a silversmithing company, but he was very much at the helm of it. And he made stuff for Asprey. He made stuff for Le Chars, other very high-end retailers at the time. And he made everything from kind of propelling pencils to pen knives and, general helpful stationery stuff. But his pieces, they're very well regarded in the silver collecting world. But like I say, that's a very small catchment. And in the broader scale, I don't think his work is that appreciated. I don't know if you guys are into art at all, but I've been following the auctions. Sotheby had the Maclo collection this week, and you look at a Cy Twombly selling for 57 million at Hammersmith, and I'm not in any way trying to say a piece of Morden is any way comparable to a Twombly, but there are certain pieces of silver that are absolutely unbelievable, and they don't go for maybe they would go for 2,000 or 3,000. So it's kind of I think the whole silver collecting world in general, to be honest with you, is very underappreciated when you compare, certainly the watch world, the art world. I would say you could throw everything into that bucket. In the way that the market has accelerated in the last 10, 15 years, I feel like collectibles in the kind of silver world have been very much left behind, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to check out some silver, Felix. So Alan, I watch a lot of Discovery Channel, and I don't know if you've ever poked around that channel, but there's a lot of picking shows, a lot of storage locker shows, a lot of antique stealing shows, and one thing that often seems to happen all the time is that the protagonist buys something with a hunch about what it might actually be, or they think it's something else, and when they take it back and actually analyze it, it's totally different, and they've got this crazy score. Has that ever happened to you? Does that happen to antique dealers in real life?
I think I recorded an episode for one of these said shows recently, so
did you?
I can speak to it a little bit. There's a little bit of theatre involved, I'll be very honest with you, with these things. However, yes, you do get very pleasant surprises sometimes, and sometimes unpleasant surprises. Some people who've been unfortunate enough to buy classic cars that look absolutely beautiful, and then maybe they have a little accident or some rust that pops up, and then they start to kind of do a little repair work, and then all of a sudden they figure out that 50% of the car is actually made of filler. These things unfortunately do happen sometimes in on a small scale in my world, yes, where things have been glued together wrongly or in the wrong places, and or covering up dents and damage, and so you can be unpleasantly surprised. I remember one thing in particular, which is, again, it's particularly nerdy, but something that stayed with me. I bought a very beautiful Asprey & Co. sterling silver letter opener. It was kind of shaped like a miniature trowel.
Sure.
And the handle was all guilloche, beautiful baby blue enamel, and there was ivory detailing, which obviously is very sad, but it was very popular during the period. And I was cleaning it because quite often, as you can imagine, a lot of these things I get are in very bad shape. And there was a little finial at the top of the end of it, and I was cleaning it, and it started to move. And I was a bit perplexed, and I pulled it, and inside was a propelling pencil. So that was a very nice surprise, really.
That's cool.
Yeah. So there's, you get things that you don't expect, good and bad. That was a good one.
Yeah, more of that, please.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We've sort of talked about the antiques market broadly, and you mentioned those huge recent art auctions, and also you're sort of saying that the watch market or the vintage watch market stands out as sort of being pretty hot right now. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are a few things at play here, many of which you've addressed before, but they are true, and that, quite frankly, comes down to demand and supply, and none of the big or small watchmakers' ateliers can keep up with demand, quite frankly. So the unfortunate effect that's having rather, is that the secondary prices are all going crazy. So I appreciate very much. More recently, I've been getting into. I'm not the only person, obviously, but the kind of '90s sport market, and obviously tritium. Um, because when I look at it from perhaps more of an antique dealer's perspective as opposed to kind of a strict watch collector's perspective, which is, I like patina, obviously, and the new materials, superluminova, etc. They're made not. I
Not
don't
to
know what you
age.
would call it, yeah, age. But I mean, they kind of, I think Rolex sort of perceive it as degrade, right? So they want it to look white forever. So I think that's making the tritium market a lot more appealing, because even 90 stuff. I mean, I've got one of those transitional subs at the moment. It's got amazing patina on it. It's not even that old. It's 1987, and the loom plots have gone a kind of crazy, kind of deep, like milky coffee color. And I think that's really something that's really starting to gain traction, but will gain a lot more traction. But again, the prices have been majorly inflated, because if you want to buy a Submariner today, you can't go into Rolex and you can't buy one. So if you really want one, then you either pay the crazy grey market price, or you look at other models that you could buy. And so that's just put a lot more tension on the kind of pre-owned market. So that's jacking up the prices. And then I think the other thing is, watches have kind of, I hate to say this, and it makes me kind of sick as I say, but like, watches have kind of become cool now,
Uh-huh.
So every menswear magazine, there's a watch section now. Every style editorial, there's watches. Where that wasn't commonplace probably even 3 to 5 years ago. Really, a few magazines would have touched on it, but now every magazine has got it, and every editorial piece will have it, and every newspaper and every pullout and every guide is talking about watches. So it's only human nature. We're all led, aren't we? So if it's watch all the time, then that's all people start thinking and talking about. So I think that's why the watch market's gone a bit crazy, really. And as I say, it's simple economics, it's supply and demand. And if you want, with all these new people coming into either the vintage market or the secondary market, if you want a beautiful watch, there is a very finite supply. And if you delve into the very rare, vintage models, that's even less so. So I think that's the reason, really.
So you mentioned you're sort of looking at the '90s stuff a little bit, more closely. What's your approach then to sort of the watches that you do buy for the store? What are you looking out for?
Well, honestly, the thing that I found very interesting recently is, I don't know if other people have missed it, but the kind of vintage Submariner market is kind of softened a little bit, honestly, the kind of 60s, 70s stuff. And I can speak to it from speaking to my clients, and that is that a lot of people I speak to want to wear their watches. They want to wear them. I've got a friend of mine who I just sold a no-date sub to, who's a sailor. And he's like, I want to go sailing. And you know what? I'm probably getting knocked in the water at some point. Is this watch going to be okay? And so I said, honestly, in that case, you need to buy a sapphire crystal sub, because if you bang the plexi on the way out the boat, there's a good chance you crack it. And if you get water in there, you've killed the watch. And so I think a lot more people actually want to wear their watches for everything. They don't just want to. It's not, I'm going to buy a big crown. I'm going to wear it to, a black tie function. That's it. It goes in the safe for another 364 days. My friend and other people that I've sold recently to, they want to wear their watches. So I think that's one reason. And I hate to say it too, but there's a lot of skullduggery that goes on with the vintage stuff. And I think it's put a lot of people off, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's a bit too much of a risk, huh?
Yeah. Me included, honestly. There's even from whatever I call myself, a watch dealer, like the technology that's involved in rebuilding cases now and fake dials and, you know, using old radium or using old tritium, and it's an absolute minefield. And I like to think I know what I'm doing. So if you're, you know, a regular punter, if you like, it's kind of terrifying, really.
Yeah, absolutely. One sort of non-watch thing I want to talk about is on Foundwell.com at the moment. You've got a lovely Cartier travel clock. Where does stuff like that fit into your mix?
Well, it's a kind of win-win for me, is it? Because I love clocks. Honestly, I collect. I have a few amazing pieces that I've kept over the years, and I don't think any home and or bedroom is complete without one, really. So, and it's funny, honestly, I've been buying and selling them for a very long time, and I've had some absolutely unbelievable pieces over the years. And quite frankly, the prices used to be cheap. It was almost kind of rude to not buy them, you know. So I've always included them for those two reasons. I just thought they were very, very undervalued for what they were. And I'm talking about big marquee names. So I'm talking about you know, Jaeger-LeCoultre. You're talking about Cartier. You know, big marquee names. Even Patek. I mean, I've had a few solar clocks from them, which they've obviously started to go up a lot more recently. But you know, 5 or 6 years ago, you could find a pretty good one for $2,000 or $3,000, which is kind of insane because when they were new, they were an absolute fortune. So I think it's, as I say, it's a beautiful thing to have in the house as an object in its own right. And being a watch and clock collector, then, as I say, to me, it kind of it's a win-win because it has both things that I love. So I think that's why I always buy and sell clocks. Honestly, I think they're beautiful things. Do you guys have clocks at home?
That's something I was going to sort of talk to you about, because Andy and I will often talk about wanting to have a JLC sort of Atmos, which
Yes.
you know is such an iconic, you know, timepiece, really. But coming from the watch perspective, for me, it's like, do I sort of spend that on another watch, or do I sort of move into clock territory? I feel that's a whole other thing. But you're absolutely right, because the other week they sort of had a charity auction in Monaco where all the watch brands um, put in a unique timepiece, and Patek this year put in a clock, like a desk clock.
Yeah,
sort of
Only watch.
only watch with real 1920s vibes. It sold for, you know, a ridiculous 10 million. But compared to the last time Patek did it, you know, a couple of years ago, that was 30 million. So
right, yeah.
I wonder if, you know, and I'd be interested on your take on this, if all this interest in watches will eventually flow through to clocks. Like people like, I really love this vintage Patek or this vintage Cartier. I can't afford a Crash or a Calatrava, but there is this cool subcategory that sort of scratches that itch. Do you think we'll see it, or is it just that are they like cufflinks?
No, I mean, I can tell you wholeheartedly that the prices of clocks have gone up a huge amount. They're still very much second fiddle to watches, but as I said, I used to buy beautiful inline JJ clocks for $600-700. You know, it was almost rude to pass them by, to be honest. You know, they needed a home. It was kind of like the last dog in the shelter. So I really am a big fan, and I think that they are finally getting the attention that they deserve. I have an Atmos myself in my bedroom, which I think is beautiful. It was the one that was designed by, I think it was Kalani, who did it in the 70s, which was kind of, I think, I may be wrong in this because I'm not an expert on the Atmos clocks because they've been around since the 20s, but I think it was kind of the first time that JJ stepped out and asked a new external designer to design a version of their clock. Obviously, now you know if Mark Newson's done one, and those are very collectible. And so I have one of those, and I love it because a lot of the other clocks I have, they need to be wound, and obviously you don't get around to winding them. Whereas the Atmos is just such a thing of wonder. It just spins all day, every day of the week for you. it's kind of amazing. And as I say, I really see them aesthetically as being very beautiful. They're works of art in their own way. You know, if you love watches and you appreciate the watch mechanically as something of wonder, then a clock is that
Yep.
just a little bit bigger. So I think they're perhaps still, yes, undervalued, but fortunately I do see them gaining traction. I mean, I will say, to counter that, you know, the Cartier mystery clocks have always been, you know, 7-figure sums, really. So there's always been a kind of niche that
Yeah.
have demanded very, very high numbers. But again, when you
Yeah,
look
cool.
at a Cartier mystery clock, for example, let's say the real works of art mystery clocks, why is a Twombly 60 million and a mystery clock 3 million, let's say, for example?
Very interesting. So it's an Atmos clock in the sheets. Alan, what do you wear on your wrist in the streets?
Amazing. I as you can imagine, I have a few watches, because I've been a collector since I was a kid, really. Never anything, unfortunately, very high value when I was a young man, when things were much more affordable. But I like outliers, really. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a little while to get into Rolex, because growing up in the kind of 80s and 90s, Rolex was kind of a bit of a douchebag watch, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it made you really look past the beauty, because it was just kind of like, ugh, it's a Rolex. And, you know, it was very unfair to do that. And I had to learn my lesson, and I came into it too late when things were crazy money. So I collected Amigas. I'm a big fan of design, and I just thought the Amiga diving watches from the 70s were just the most fun, kind of colourful, unusual case shapes, design, and they just looked amazing to me. So I went through a period of collecting those, the various different models that they made, and I'm a huge Hoya fan. I have I'm fortunate enough to have pretty much every Hoya sport model that I wanted at this point. And it's weird, because it all started with the Monaco. I was infatuated by that watch as a teenager. Where my mum has her antique store in London, there's a couple of guys, Mike and his brother. They sell
Yep.
watches, and they had a Monaco years ago. You know, the classic Steve McQueen, and I just always wanted that watch. And I think at the time it was probably, you know, 2,400 quid or something ridiculous, and or maybe even less. Even I'm probably imagining that. And then I finally got to buy one for myself, which was, I don't know, maybe 10 or so years ago, and I hated wearing it. I sold it pretty quickly. So of all the sport watches that I really loved, that was the one that I wanted. And when I got it, I didn't want it. But I have a few of the other sport watches, which, again, I love. For me, Rolex was so boring. You took the Oyster case and you just put different dials on, or maybe added a second time zone hand, and it was like, there's your Oyster case. Whereas Hoya came up with brilliant designs, and their use of color was fantastic. And then I am a big fan of motor racing too. So you've got the Motor Racing Association, and so
Yeah,
those.
Hoya's an interesting one.
Yeah.
It was really crazy. Probably, I don't know, it peak in 2019, 2020? It's probably 2019
Yeah, well, there
where it
was
was going
auction,
crazy.
wasn't there? So that really was Philips, wasn't it? Who did the big.
Yeah, they did the Gavin and Crossweight
Yeah,
auction, I
exactly.
think.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
really, well, there was the Hassinger sale a long time ago, which I think was
Yes.
Bonhams, which
Yes.
kind of put them on the map a little bit. But it was going back to kind of the watch craze. It was kind of pre-peak watch mania,
Yeah.
so it never really had the effect on prices that the Philips one did.
Yeah, I sort of see it like we had Panerai a couple of years before that, like that sort of vintage, hype around that brand, and then it was Hoya, and
Yeah,
I think there's Patek, there's Rolex, and maybe now the hype is around Cartier. I don't know.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I think Hoya, but Hoya will come back, because the thing that always fascinates me about the watch market in particular, and I'm good friends with Eric Bend, who you've had on the show, obviously, and we talk quite a lot, and he knows I'm very passionate about Hoya, and as is he, actually. And when you talk about production numbers, I mean, they made very, 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 very few of the real icon watches. When you compare that to, say, a Daytona, where there are many. So, based on pure economics, again, if you look at things, demand and supply, unfortunately, the demand for Hoya really, tailed off after the hype of that post auction. But it will come back, because they're fabulous watches. The caliber, the automatic caliber that was introduced with those 3 models in '69. I mean, it was a great movement. And as I say, from a design perspective, and then you look who used to wear them. Formula One drivers used to wear these watches. Like actors and actresses used to wear these watches. I mean, they're very, very cool things. And so, if you think about that, you've got very rare, very beautiful, well-made watches. The only way, I think, is up for Hoya, in my opinion. They had a little bump in the road, but it'll come back. I have to say, from personal, I love wearing their watches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good sort of point to wrap that on. Quality will out. Alan, it's been great chatting to you, but I've got one more question. I don't want to hear about antiques. I don't want to hear about watches. I want to hear about what you've been doing to pass the time, or what's been listening, watching, reading, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I'm a big sports fan. I'm a big football fan. I'm an Arsenal fan, season ticket holder. So even during the dark days of the pandemic, I was following my team through very difficult times. It's been a very difficult time to be an Arsenal fan. We seem to be coming out of it at the moment. The new manager's got, a new manager, he's 2.5 years in, but he's got a very wonderful crop of young superstars coming through. So that's making me very happy. Book-wise, I do like to read, perhaps not as much as I should do, but I did just get, I bought a really cool, very rare Movado. Actually, it's a brooch, which is kind of fascinating, but it's in the shape of a ship's wheel. And I was told that it's in the Movado history book, and that's a watch book I didn't have. So I picked up that watch book. I don't know if you know that book, but it's amazing. And I've always liked Movado, but it's actually given me a crazy appreciation of early Movado.
Yeah, totally.
And then Dos Passos' USA trilogy is something that I'm getting my way into right now. An amazing read, so highly recommend that. Yeah, I'm not really much for TV. I'm afraid I won't. I did watch Money Heist. That was something that I kind of watched, but I'm not. Yeah.
There's better out there than Money Heist.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, see, there you go. I'm open to suggestions.
Well, if you're a football fan,
yes,
Ted Lasso.
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, he is on the list. I've not been able to watch it, but yes, I've heard it's very good.
And I'm gonna jump in actually and make an on-brand recommendation that I think we alluded to at the start, Alan.
Yes.
Fake or Fortune. You can't go past it.
Oh, amazing.
Well, Philip Mould, Fiona Bruce, the super team of art sleuths.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, and the way they go about it actually is really good too. It's I highly recommend that show. Yes, exactly.
And good to see he gets the endorsement from the professional that it's not all
exactly. No, I really love it. Yeah, I mean, I know potentially of a de Kooning that is under someone's bed, which I kind of need to get in touch with the show and try and see if it's. I mean, they may laugh at it and may be a complete joke, but it inspired me to want to figure out if this is actually a real one or not. So
That's cool. It's the Wildenstein Institute that'll get you in the end.
right, exactly.
Alan, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you. We'll have to get you back on when you're a multimillionaire after you've sold the de Kooning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be. You can ask me what I spent my millions on. Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you so much for the insights. We'll of course link everything up, and
Thank you,
great to
Andy.
chat.
Felix, a pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
Andy, Alan, what a guy.
What a guy.
I always love a good Ralph Lauren story.
That's the benchmark for stories, isn't it?
Mate.
If you can tell a Ralph Lauren story, you're an interesting person.
I don't have a Ralph Lauren story.
No, not yet.
Hey, let's get him on the pod. If you, Alan,
DM
if
him,
you know Ralph, just flick his email on and, get him on our Discord. Boom. Let's just spread rumors about having Ralph Lauren on our Discord. Andy, serious note though, thank you very much to Nomos for sponsoring this week's episode.
Thank you.
And of course, check out their site for, fun and, slightly watch-related Christmas gifts. If you want to complain to us about anything, you can email us at otthepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to, let us know how great we are, do that on Instagram, ot.podcast. If you just want to talk about your hot takes or, conspiracy theories about Red Notice, Discord is the way to do it.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah, and of course, subscribe, share social media, tell people IRL, tell people, on IRL message boards. IRC, one of those ones. Anyway, let's get on with our lives, Andy.
Let's do it, Felix. Till next time.